So let's go get on with the show. Hey, Scout, you made it. Hey there.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Scout Tafoya is in the house. He's a film critic and a filmmaker. Very talented, and we're very happy to have him here. We've introduced everyone else, and you've met Carrie Rickey. So I understand it was a little more difficult getting everybody to come back in because the weather's so nice today, but you came in because you know, those of you who have been here before and you've been here with the Alloy Orchestra, you know you're in for a treat. Roger and I first heard them in Telluride, so don't tell Tom Luddy. Carrie, don't tell Tom Luddy. We stole the Alloy Orchestra from Telluride, but they still go there too, I think. Tomorrow, okay. Anyway, Ken Winokur and Terry Donahue and Roger Miller have been here, I think, for the fifth, this is maybe your 15th time, something like that. And we actually, most of the films we invite closer to the festival, we invite them a year in advance to make sure that they're here. And we tell them we will give you any space on the schedule that you can promise to be here. And so this is the day, so a year in advance. Someone else will introduce the film that we're showing tonight, which is a page of madness. But what I want to do is introduce the person who's going to introduce the film. He's also been here with our festival many times, Professor Richard Newport, and he is the Charles H. Wheatley Professor of the Arts and Josiah Meigs Distinguished Teaching Professor in Film Studies at the University of Georgia. He's the author of A History of the French New Wave Cinema, and his most recent book, John Lasseter, about the rise of Pixar, is available from the University of Illinois Press. Please help me welcome Professor Richard Newport.
Thank you very much. Good to be here again. Thank you very much, Chaz. It's always great to be back. And actually, my editor, Daniel Nassett's out here somewhere, too. And thanks to Nate Cohn for also including me yet again here. And I got to say, I mean, Roger Ebert was a big fan of not just mainstream and independent cinema, but avant-garde cinema. And I'm really glad that this tradition has kept going with the Silence and the wonderful Alloy Orchestra down here. Well, just a couple quick things about it, and afterwards the Alloy Orchestra and Nell Minnow will be up here with me to talk about the movie, so stick around for that lively discussion. Well, prior to making this movie, Kinugasa acted in theater. As it mentions in the program, I believe he acted also as a female impersonator. And I think we'll have to wait and see, does that really affect the role of women in this film? Is he more sensitive to women? I'm not sure. He ran away from home as a boy to follow a theater troupe. It's one of those sort of tropes, kind of mythical kind of issues. But then once he was in theater and starting to move into film, he met a group of people who were really interested in radical avant-garde practice. They started to become really influenced by Europeans, and even in 1920s Japan, they were really interested in things like Cubism. They heard about Expressionism, Impressionism, Dada, and in literature, a stream of consciousness suddenly became really cool. So these are people who decided that traditional theater is kind of the enemy. Traditional cinema in Japan was also an enemy, and before the big earthquake of 23, it was much more traditional and literary, theatrical as well. So what they really wanted to do was revitalize Japanese cinema. Now, Kinugasa set up his own tiny independent film company. He managed to interest his collaborators and friends in a tale about madness, in this institution of an asylum was going to be their playground in some ways. He managed to intrigue and convince a well-known actor, Masuo Inoue, to come and play the central character, and the guy agreed to do it for nothing. He was so intrigued with the idea of something new, something brand new that Japan would be able to offer. So he plays the central character. Shoshiku Studio, which in Japan became one of the big three, gave them free studio space because they also wanted this prestige production. So it's kind of a small production, but it's also was seen already as something important on the horizon. And then one of the other people he knew, Yasunari Kawabata, who was an up-and-coming young writer, short stories, etc., he wrote really melodramatic tales, but with stream of consciousness, blurring reality, and imaginations. So they brought him on to help the script. Now, one thing to keep in mind is there never really was a single script. A bunch of friends helped. A bunch of people have made reactions to it. They started shooting without a final script, so a lot of people gave him ideas. Kinugasa took some things, had others he threw out, and it really was a kind of progress of this film being made. The group became known as the New Impressionist Film League, and one of the big influences was Impressionism. So French Impressionism is really fascinated with cinematic devices, chaotic, discontinuous montage and editing sometimes, lots of distorting camera movement. They kind of shoot on the fly to try to communicate emotions of the characters. It's about mental states, fantasies, hallucinations even, and sometimes you don't know which, if any, of those it is. He was also really influenced by An Inhuman Woman, which we saw 2 years ago here as well. It's also influenced by German Expressionism. Last year we saw a German Expressionist film with the Albert Orchestra. And that influence comes in the ways of paranoia as theme, madness, the sort of post-World War I madness, but also the sets. Watch the sets, the shadow, this notion of entrapment is physically there as well as in the themes. He was really influenced by Dr. Caligari, even though I guess the program thinks he wasn't. And The Last Laugh. The Last Laugh is a film, also a German Expressionist film with no intertitles. And Kinugasa wanted a film with no intertitles, which makes it kind of hard to ignore dialogue. Excuse me. Seeing Kinugasa makes me thirsty. Anyway, Kinugasa and his cohort then were really fascinated with something called pure cinema. In Europe and France, they were talking for pure cinema, a cinema of cinematic rhythm, because they're fascinated with, can the cinema do stuff that other arts can't? Can it do what literature is trying to do with stream of consciousness? And they really came up with this idea that, you know, the mind works differently than words on a page, and the mind works very differently than real actors on a stage. It's cinematic. And there became, and psychoanalysis was also talking about cinema is just like the mind. There's this unconscious things coming forward, and that movies could do this better than others. So chaotic events should not be psychologically, realistically handled to these people. And they really wanted cinema to open new doors for exploring human thought and how humans get along together, human experience. So they're trying to break free from filmed theater. They're trying to break free from the linear stories and make cinema lively. So they want it to be poetic, rhythmic, like purely visual medium. A lot of people at this era and in Japan were saying the best movies should be like visual music. And this is going to inspire our musicians, certainly. So they just had this real new faith in cinema doing something completely different. Well, this gives lots of freedom to editors, gives lots of freedom to camera operators, and the writers even and directors, but what's it do to us, right? So they've got this great creative freedom to do all this distortion stuff, but it really challenges the audience. The audience has to really kind of look at shards of clues, try to figure out exactly what's going on. And when you add that to the fact that there are no intertitles, it makes it a really difficult, challenging experience that is wildly good and artistic in lots of ways. Let me give you just an example. The first 5 minutes could be interpreted about 18 different ways. There seems to be a storm. There's one of the women in the asylum who dances a lot, and you're going to see her dance till her feet are bloody. In this opening sequence. So there's a lightning storm, a car seems to be coming in, you've got cells, a woman dancing, and the question is this like a prelude that all these things will be explained later on? Not necessarily, don't count on it. Is this setting up the themes of the movie? Probably. Is this woman dancing because there's a storm and it reminds her of the night she was brought to the asylum in a car? Maybe. or is somebody new being brought to the asylum, and this reminds her of the stormy night she was brought there. But so all these kind of things, it's a mishmash of hallucination, wonderful rhythms, but you're not going to get a clear exposition of character early on. So one of the things to know, at the time it came out, there would have been a benchie, a narrator in the room, explaining, sometimes doing dialogue in commercial films. So for this one, different benchies would treat the film differently. We'll talk a little about that afterwards. We've got a couple snippets of what they might have said. But when this movie first showed, audiences like you would have been handed a summary of the plot when they walked in the door. Now, I don't know many movies that have done this. So I'm going to give you, in addition to what's in the program, here's a possible summary of the storyline that holds us together. It's a wonderful, wacky, beautiful experience. It is limited to an insane asylum and its grounds. There's a sort of low-level employee, janitor, custodial person who is now working there apparently because his wife is a patient or inmate in this institution. He seems weighed down by sorrow and apparently guilt for her situation. Perhaps he was cruel. Maybe he was abusive in the past at some point. We don't get flashbacks that we know of. He may be a sailor who was absent for long periods of time and come home to find her in this sad situation. And they have a daughter who comes to visit her mother regularly, hasn't been there in a while, and shows up and discovers her estranged father is working here and watching over her poor mother in her cell as well. And apparently the daughter is engaged. And is coming to tell her mother, and now she gets to tell her father. And he's upset initially by this, even though he's happy to talk to her, because this might continue their cycle of madness in the family. So that's kind of, it's not giving away much, believe me. That's kind of a plot summary as well. So, as Kinugasa said, the story is less important than the technical experimentation. Tracking shots, close-ups, rapid montage, flashbacks, dissolves. In this film, I used every avant-garde technique. So what did other people think? I got two short things and we'll get going with the movie. One contemporary review of the time said, "A Page of Madness owes nothing to literature, nothing to theater, and nothing even to language. It points the way to the future." Now another short blurb said at the same time, a different newspaper said, "There's no need to understand the damn narrative. They cut out all the usual story information, so you can just relax and let your senses take over." And I think that's the best advice on how to watch this movie. So let's go back to the 1920s Japan, when the avant-garde spirit in Europe and in Asia were really shaking up cinema in Japan and throughout the international film scene. The Alloy Orchestra here will add another level of meaning and interpretation to this really rare delight of a show. And be warned, we'll see you on the other side of this page of madness. So thank you very much. Enjoy the show.